Recording has started. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Sustainability and Community Resilience meeting for the 5th of June 2025. I have all members present. Would just like to acknowledge that Reka and John are online. Thank you for coming. I declare the meeting open and I would ask you to stand for a karakia, please. Kia tau nai manakitanga a te mea ngaro. Ki ronga ki tēnā a tātou. Kia mahia e hua makihiki, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te araha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturu ka whakamoe ai kia tīna, hui e taiki e. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting. I'd also like to acknowledge we have Deputy Mayor Walker observing this meeting with us. Welcome, Terry. And we have Dennis Teague and John Lehman in the public gallery. I don't believe they're down to speak, but welcome, gentlemen, to the meeting. We've got all members, so we don't have any apologies. Just confirm neither of you want to speak in public forum. Thank you. I haven't had anything provided to me as to be late on the agenda or late urgent items. So speak now if you have any of those. No. All right. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest that they need to declare at this point? Silence. Perfect. Although I do encourage you to talk during the meeting. Minutes of confirmation. Assume that you've all read those, so I'm going to take them as read. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive those minutes? Councillor Connell?
Happy to second.
Councillor Morrissey? I'll take that. Do we confirm that the November 6th, 2024 meetings are true and correct record of proceedings? All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Which brings us.
So had it been noted that someone called Rodney had moved a motion in there rather than Rodley?
That I am assured that member Rodley, who actually moved that, will be corrected in the final version of the minutes. I won't sign anything until it's corrected. So it brings us on to item 2.1, proposed climate change strategy, and we have with us Eamon Martin and Graham Pollard. I'll leave it with you, gentlemen.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'll be presenting most of the first item with Graham supporting me and vice versa for the second one. So assuming we're sharing the screen now. So the first slide, I just wanted to highlight the intention for this strategy to go to the council meeting on the 24th of June. That's not far away. We'll be picking up any comments, if there are any suggested changes, and making those over the next 24 hours to get them into the agenda pack. The other thing this slide includes is just a bit of an overview of I guess there's the strategy that's sitting at the top. There's 3 programs within the strategy: the risk management aspect, the emission reduction, and climate adaptation. Off to the side, which we haven't done yet, is I've called it an investment plan, but understanding the full package of what's required under the program and any associated costs. And these 3 at the bottom. The 3 at the bottom are well in train, I'd say. They're not quite finished, but they're very close. The climate change risk register. So there's a identification of risks spreadsheet along with mitigation actions, some costs associated. Emission reduction plan, which we'll see next. And then there's the shoreline management plan business case. That has largely been progressing through the oversight of the Thames Protection and Resilience Group, and we'll look to come back to that governance group, which is jointly governed by Regional Council and Ngāti Maru, at the end of this month. So that business case is quite comprehensive. It's not just about Thames. And then as I've written these things down, kind of taking a step back, there's quite a lot of overlap. So things that are in the business case also address the risks in the risk register. And I think for me, that highlights one of the things in the strategies, which is enabling efficiency and cost reduction over the whole program. So in many cases, or some cases, we're doing things once here, doing them in a way that addresses multiple drivers. So that's positive. Any questions just on that aspect?
Just procedurally, my apologies. Before we get to questions, I might just ask for a mover and a second to receive the report. So I will second that. All those in favour? And then Councillor Connell, please.
So what appears to be one of the biggest challenges for a piece of work like this is that it touches every department and every business unit or every activity of the entire council. So, and you may have this later in a presentation, but how do you get the working together or the dovetailing with all those different departments who are busy doing business, building control, or they're over here doing whatever? Is there a plan for the way the organisation will dovetail this sort of work?
Great question, and I don't think we've got a comprehensive plan. We've got lots of individual plans and tasks. So some of them have been identified in the risk management aspect or in the implementation plan. And so at the moment, we've got a very long list of things to do. An example will be the business case talks about spatial planning and links the hazards and the changing hazards, whereas we need to go and talk this afternoon to people about spatial planning, which is going to be coming to council to make sure those things align. So that's an example of a task. You could talk to infrastructure, making sure planning for infrastructure includes climate change. So at the moment, we don't have an overarching plan to integrate into council, but a whole lot of individual things.
I'm just wondering, there are a lot of staff, but there is such value in a piece of work or a strategy or a policy like this that I'm wondering if there are opportunities to sit staff down and actually just go through it with them, even if it doesn't touch them as, say, customer service person or whatever. But there is that sense of buy-in from the whole team, even if there isn't an action for that person to do, there is an awareness, even down to, the staff that are wandering around with their disposable coffee cups. But hey, let's not go there. I imagine myself, having worked in this space, that I would want all of my team to understand what this new policy or strategy was that was moving ahead, even if I wasn't part of actioning it.
Yeah, I think that's really good feedback, and we can think about ways to do that. We've got, you'll see 2 slides later, we've got some pictures, and that's when we had our planning day, and one of the main focuses of the planning day was how to do our internal comms. So, and even though we don't have a plan, it's definitely on the radar in our thinking.
I've got a question that follows up from that, and then I'll ask John Morrissey what his question is. But I know that in the making of this strategy, because you spoke to us in November, Graham, and mentioned that you had 8 managers that had been involved in making this, maybe you could refresh us what those departments were.
Yes, certainly. So directly involved in part of the working group for this, we've had corporate planning, asset planning, property services, risk and assurance, communications, regulatory management and area management. We've also had input throughout by going and talking around the organisation and presenting the developing draft to the various teams. We've had input from district planning, waters, roading, waste, project management, parks and open spaces, legal governance, finance, emergency management, TCAN and navigation. I think it's just about everybody who's had an input and been able to feed into this. It really is across the organisation. And one of the other things, just following on from the previous question, that we're looking at trying to develop a template for climate impact assessment. So for projects, business cases, potentially decisions being taken within the executive team or the management team, and also coming through to this chamber as well, so that the climate lens is put across everything. So that's one way of trying to embed this throughout the organisation.
John Morrissey.
That is precisely what I was going to suggest should happen, so that this just doesn't become a piece of paper that sits on a shelf, but is considered with all policy and business cases. I hate the word tick box, but just being put there as a reminder that it needs to be considered. Anyway, that wasn't my question, but that's probably the way forward, to make it a tick box, if you like, just to be considered at those levels. Going back to the implementation and investment plan, and it's just got dollars in it. So when this goes to council, did I hear you say previously that those dollars or estimates will be available at that stage?
Yeah, so there's two things to highlight with those dollars. A lot of the tasks are already tasks that are planned for or being undertaken by council. So there's things that have got budget, have been identified, and then some of them are not. So it's understanding the ones that are not already on the radar and what additional dollars we need to support them, and then probably decisions through LTPs, balancing priorities on whether those additional things, how high they sit on the priority list. So we don't have the cost yet, but that is one of the next things to work on, the overall costs.
Okay. Yeah, sitting here, I'll let my phone on going. I'll just kill that. Okay, so have you any idea what those dollars might be, or what will be on the paper when it goes to council? Any rough idea?
It's too premature for me to pull out a number here that will be wrong, and just how wrong it will be is the question.
Right, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so the next part of the presentation is just highlighting some of the changes that have been made since the last version you've seen. I think it will look quite different, and I haven't actually included it, but has gone to our graphic designer to make it look like a strategy for council. The executive summary has been updated. There's reference to being efficient in terms of the projects and cost savings that we might be aiming to achieve in there. There's a section on scope. We talked about that at the last time. Some things are in our control versus influence, and so just knowing that scope of where we act is useful. Additional commentary, renewable energy was one that was flagged last time. That's an interesting area, potentially lots happening around the country and in our district, but also local water's done well. How might that be influencing our thinking? There's a bit around carbon sinks. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is the targets have been reworded in terms of emission reductions. So some changes, but largely the same as what you've seen previously.
So I'm glad you mentioned local water's done well, because we would need to preempt, let's say, theoretically, because the decision hasn't been made, that we join with a couple of other councils to create a water services organisation. And we have a very strong philosophy of climate action and reducing emissions and behaving, if you like, in the most environmentally friendly and sustainable manner. We would have to be very clear of our mandate when we move into negotiations with those other councils. So if we make that a non-negotiable of our relationship with them, or a playing card, they might want something for us. I know we've got great debt headroom and we're a very attractive dance partner. So our card that we play back may be around sustainability with an eye to the environment and what we can do. To have a contractor running that program, to have a board or trust that is aware of our climate aspirations.
I wholeheartedly agree. No, well, I'll allow it, obviously.
So you were just talking before about section 5 with the scope of the climate change strategy. I wonder if in that second paragraph at the end it says our role includes blah blah and aligning local initiatives with broader national strategies. I wonder if we could also reference in their regional strategies, so what our WRC are doing. I'd like to tell you, page 18. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem referencing regional strategies, and I think we know where that would fit.
It doesn't look like there are any further questions. Oh, no, Rika, sorry, didn't see you there, mate. Go ahead, Rika.
Hi, thanks. Morning, Amon. Just on page 5 of your document, which is page 16 of our order paper, under your graph, which talks about the impacts of climate change for Thames Coromandel District, the first little thermometer icon that you have there, I think you've got a typo within the graphic, and I'm assuming that that should read 2090.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That was one that we picked up quite late before the agenda went out, and so that will be addressed as well.
And the other comment that I had, which is on page 9 of your document, page 18 of our order paper, you've got guiding principles, and under the one that talks about boldly, I just think that whole statement needs to be looked at, because it doesn't quite read, it doesn't make sense.
Could you just repeat that? Sorry, I didn't catch the whole of it, and I'm hoping that those guys did, but I didn't. Can you just repeat that?
So it's on page 18 of our order paper, but page 9 of the document, under our guiding principles, which is a blue box towards the bottom of page 9, and in the middle there's a statement under act boldly, and I just think it needs to be reread. It doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, I've found the one you mean, and we're happy to have a look at it. I think it says we will display strong leadership required to address the climate challenges and opportunities for the district, but we can look at rewording that. Any specific words that you'd want in there, or you just think it needs a relook?
I just think we will display strong leadership required. the strong leadership required. We will take the strong leadership position required to address. Just have a reread and
The addition of the word the, we will display the strong leadership required would make a difference.
I'm very happy, Amon, if you've heard and you can get your wordsmithy people to make it right. I'm very happy. Thank you, Councillor Gary Percival.
So also in the resolution for today is adoption with the inclusion of impacts on Māori. So this was something that wasn't previously included, and thought that was more than appropriate to have something in there. I've tried to summarise our thinking really briefly in terms of so what we've done is since this was developed, gone away and done some thinking about the text that would be appropriate. We have some words that we like that have close to being final, but they're not final, and we just need to work out how to incorporate them in the right places in the document. The theme of those texts are that 20% of the population is Māori. There's specific knowledge and history that is of value that can be brought into the thinking in the climate change space, and that there's quite a lot of direct impacts. And I'm dealing with some of these at an operational level in terms of sand dunes and managing historic urupa or wahi tapu, as well as the Māori economy and mussel farms and other things. So it just feels more than appropriate to include some context about what's the impacts, largely the impacts of climate change on Māori.
I tautoko your kaupapa, and would also add tapping into the resource that is Māori knowledge or understanding as kaitiaki in terms of passed down knowledge, for example, of how the land changes tidally or whatever. You know, there's a lot of tikanga as well as practice as well as historical knowledge that can actually be tapped on into. So totally acknowledge being part of the conversation, but also recognising that local iwi can be a resource as well and actually help to inform some of the decisions that we make.
The thing that haven't let you know about is we're also updating the section headings to be bilingual as well.
As it should be. Nobody else has any comments about this slide? Except I think just general agreement. This is an important consideration and it needs to be included in the strategy.
So the last one, I think the point is we are forming a strategic direction. That's where we're heading. That's the picture on the left, and we have a climate change team. And the point about the team, which has been articulated by others today, is it's not just the team, it's the organisation that's going to make a difference when we're looking at climate change impacts and how we're going to do the best long term for the community. And so that was our first team planning day where we were quite focused on internal comms and reaching across the wider organisation.
Can you just, I think is that Andrea Whitehead, Jamie Boyle, and the lady in the background?
Kate O'Malley, yeah. So
it's Kate O'Malley. Okay, gotcha. Who's the lady with the grey hair? Oh, that is Kate. Okay, gotcha.
So Kate isn't actually in the team, but she was our comms person for that day, yeah. And yeah, unless there's any questions? That's all I've got to present.
Yeah, before we go on to the emissions reduction plan, I just had possibly two questions around section 9, financing the strategy. So see, I don't know how this works, and I've had a couple of different answers over several years. If, for instance, you are able to reduce costs, and just an example might be tapping into some methane and selling it, or making some solar panels and to generate energy. How does that work as far as if you knocked $50,000 off the power bill for a wastewater treatment plant or for council as general? How does that work as far as being able to say, right, can we ring fence that money for future things? Do we have to pay loans back first? How can we kind of yeah, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I think.
Do you know what I mean?
I know where you're heading, and I don't have an actual answer for you. I think primarily if you were saving money, whether it's a building or a wastewater treatment plant, that would be a saving to that business unit rather than a pot of money you could pick up and put somewhere else. You might need to go through a bit of a process to identify savings and then establish a new fund that has been offset by the savings made. But it wouldn't be automatic in terms of being able to get that money, is my understanding.
So potentially, I guess, if there was a new unit set up that was the renewable energy unit, there would have to be some work done to specify what happened to the savings and how they funded the initial capital expenditure, that sort of thing.
Yes, I was really just going to say, to follow on from your comment, Councillor Rodley, it would be very nice if those savings didn't just get lost in terms of organisational knowledge. So if we've made a change and it has positively impacted our climate goals, but has also positively created savings, it would be really nice for that to be reported back and acknowledged, in much the same way as on page 17 of our agenda document, which talks about current initiatives and opportunities. There are lots of really positive comms stories there to think about, and so this would be just one other positive comms story that we should not lose sight of.
Councillor, there's lots of things that I don't know yet, but one of the things that I imagine will happen as part of the implementation plan will allow us to prioritise those pieces of work that will make savings, which will allow finance to understand or give finance an understanding across the implementation plan of where the savings might be found. And then there's another decision to be made around what we might do with those savings, or whether, but just from we've similar experience at previous council.
Councillor Connell?
Kia ora, Jeanette. Stole all my thunder because, you know, I'm all about comms and I love a graphic, because the average person over their cup of tea doesn't want to read a 2,000-word essay on what we're up to, but they will look at the graphs and they will look at pies and they will go, oh my God, council's actually saved 20% of their expenditure on X, which means that it's going to affect our rates, or they're actually trying to be fiscally responsible. But the other thing that I often rave about is the sinking lid. So in some aspects of climate and adaptation, some things should get less. So I'm thinking about the waste contract, for example, that I don't want our waste contractors to continue to ask for more money and to have more bins and collect more waste. What I want is that to become a cheaper contract, because people are recycling more. They're not buying products that are covered in packaging. They've got a worm farm like I have, and that the levers of these cost savings can then inform things like our SMP, our shoreline management protocols, and help to fund those things. So I think there's a big conversation with our financial team around, and it does worry me, it's that organisation-wide lens where you can, it's a bit like a sound desk at a concert. You can go, oh, we can pull down the waste collection stuff a bit and pay less at landfill, but we can ramp up the coastal protection for Thames. I'm just thinking of creative financing.
Absolutely agree. And actually that segues really nicely into my next point in terms of creative financing and what the strategy could be used for. Because I see on page 21 of our agenda, which is page 15 of the strategy, there's a lovely bullet point list there of budget for climate actions identified, and grants is listed there. And I assume that that's external grants. And I wonder if you see a role in this strategy to help maybe community groups that rent our premises, or that so for example, I think immediately of CAB, who are a separate entity to council, but rent a building that is owned by council, and there are lots of those. Would this strategy be helpful to them to be able to apply for grants to put facilities like solar panels on our buildings? Just thinking that they have access to funding that we don't have access to because they're a charity.
Yeah, I think the strategy enables that, but it's probably a level down where we need to do work about supporting grants. So that the strategy in itself is not this enabler as far as the next part would be.
Okay, but we're on our way.
Yes.
Thank you. Graham?
Just referring back and just coming back to the climate impact assessments, so we can really get those going. Where that works in terms of finances, we can say, well, if we build it the way we've always built things, it will cost X. If we do it this way, that might save carbon emissions, for example, or whatever, it might make us, I don't know, a 5% or a 10% saving if we do it this way. If we do it another way, it might cost us 5% more. And that's kind of consideration as to how much budget we allocate to that project, which might be a one-off project, but how much that will cost. That then gives the decision makers more information as to which option to go for. So.
Understood. I'll just check with the councillors online if you have any further questions about the strategy before we move to the motions.
No, I'm fine, thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
I'm fine, Dee.
Perfect. Well, in that case, thank you. I think this has been a really valuable discussion. We have two further motions ahead of us. So one is to approve the proposed climate change strategy, subject to the additions that we spoke about of Te Reo Māori section headings and the impacts of climate change on Māori. And the third is to recommend to council that it adopt the proposed climate change strategy. And I'm happy to move those from the chair as a bundle with the two of them. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Robin.
Oh, no, Delly's beaten you to it, but
Can I make a proviso? I'm not entirely happy with the impacts on Māori. I would prefer that it included, how can we word it? It's that consultation and it's that generational and Indigenous knowledge that.
what was it titled on the slide? Was that impacts or was that a different?
Because impact just sounds like
yeah,
an affected party, but I think there's a resource there.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree. Have you got any thoughts about what we could change it to?
So
anybody?
So would we be approving option 2? Approval of the strategy, but with amendments?
No. I believe it, just from what I'm hearing you saying, is that we're approving the strategy as it is. Oh, yes. No, I get it. Let me think. Your concern is the wording in the resolution as opposed to the wording in the strategy. Hang on, help us out.
So the impacts is where we started, and it quite quickly I think in the second bullet point acknowledged that the history and the value of working with Māori. So that is going a step beyond impacts. So the words that we're planning on including have moved slightly beyond impacts and have that aspect in there as well. And I appreciate you picking up that, because it gives us a more clear mandate to include some of those things that aren't just impacts. It's almost around opportunities, but I'm not sure how you wordsmith that quickly.
Is it impacts and opportunities of liaising or consulting with iwi?
Please, Jeanette. Yep.
Jeanette?
Yeah, thank you. Can I suggest that we, so that piece of work is sitting on my desk at the moment, and I'm happy to work with Amon and staff to wordsmith that in an appropriate way. Do you want us to bring it?
What I was thinking in terms of your question about is this option 1 or option 2, from what you said earlier, you have an idea of the words that we need to put in, the themes. And so this isn't a substantive change that is going to change the timeline of this going to council, which is option 1. And I think what you're talking about, Dali, is the exact wording of resolution 2.
Okay.
So potentially doesn't need to be that far up on your desk. I think we can solve it now and I like the impacts and opportunities, because I think that is okay. I think it does. So I'd be really happy as the mover to change that. Jessie, happy? Yep, sure. Thank you. So it would be changing. Yeah. Resolution 2, impacts and opportunities of climate change on Māori. I'm happy with it. You're happy with it? Members, happy? 2 thumbs up from Martin. Online members. John?
Always happy. Yep.
Would you like me to
But are you happy about that? I don't think we need to see that on screen. I think that we can 2 words and opportunities. So I'll just read, just for absolute clarity, the resolution will now read: approves the proposed climate change strategy subject to the addition of Te Reo Māori section headings and the impacts and opportunities of climate change on Māori. Agreed? Okay. Excellent. So we're all in favour. We've got a mover, we've got a seconder for resolutions 1 and 2. All in favour, say aye. Aye. I saw a hand up. That is, no, hand up for Rebecca. Thank you. That is passed. Lovely.
Thank you for indulging my amendment.
I think that being correct and unambiguous is great. We moved 2 and 3 together. Thank you for coming. Bye. All right, we do have one more item, which I believe that we still have Amon and Graham for. This is the proposed greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan, and I will do this properly this time by saying, before we start the discussion, can we please receive the report dated the 6th of May? I've got Councillor Connell. Do I have a seconder? And Councillor Rodley. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, you can take it as read, but please lead on.
Thank you, Chair. This is your first look really at, although you've had background information in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions inventories. This is the proposed greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan. So how we're going to take those emissions reduction work forward. This is the first document that is aimed at implementing the strategy. So taking the report as read, thank you. So I'd like to emphasize that we have in this document, apart from some of the background information on which it's based, we have interim targets that are specific, really specific. They are based on those emission scopes in the inventory and fit with the long-term 2050 targets that are in the strategy. And the thinking is that we set these in 3-yearly blocks so that they fit within the long-term plan cycle. So we can then see, right, this is what the target is, this is what we need to do, and that fits into the planning cycle for the LTP across the relevant services. They are based on where we are now, 2024, which is the year that we recently reported to committee. But the targets themselves are based on our baseline average financial years 2019 and 2021. Now, the interesting thing is, and we were talking about local waters done well, that we've also put in to the document some additional targets. So if we find that whatever the decision of council is and whatever the government comes out with and the Office of the Auditor General as to whether we have to continue accounting for the water's emissions in the future or not. If we don't have to, then we've got targets already set for what that would look like. And the interesting thing is that our biogenic methane emissions target for 2050, under that scenario, we've already met that one. As long as we keep our waste from council down in the meantime. So that's really positive, and I thought you might like that piece of good news. So we've got interim targets. We also have an action plan that will feed into the implementation and investment plan under the climate change strategy. That again is organised by those emission scopes, but and the targets, and it also includes what we can do looking into carbon sinks and where we might go with those. In terms of the finance, again, as with the implementation and investment plan, a lot of the actions initially are investigatory to see what options we've got going forward that we think can be done under the existing budgets. We also have some actions that are ongoing, so already funded, and they'll be part of business as usual. And there'll be other work where there isn't finance at the moment, be part of other projects that might be in the later years of the current LTP, where we might be looking for funding for those actions through the next LTP. So that's how we're looking at financing those. And the other thing, you might have spotted this graph. If you're not sure quite how to read this, I'll explain that the width of each bar is indicative of the amount of greenhouse gases that we would avoid by taking that action. So you can see that electrification of the motor vehicle fleet is going to save us the most emissions out of those 5 initiatives. Any bar coming below the black line will save us money in the long term for each bit of greenhouse gas that we avoid. Anything above the line, which is only one project, is actually going to cost more than doing nothing. So the black line, if you like, is doing nothing. That project, which is around water conservation meters, is obviously quite capital intensive because you've got to buy the meters and fit them, which is why it's actually going to cost slightly more than doing nothing. So, but the value of that project is more in the water efficiency as much as saving carbon emissions through reducing the amount of electricity you need to treat and pump the water. So that's how that works. If you weren't sure, some people look at it and scratch their heads. So that's how that one works. Any questions?
Just a comment really that it's so the two blue bars, the one that's above and the one that's below, aren't independent data points, because the one that's below, the water conservation leaks, is dependent on the one that's above, and so there's some.
Not necessarily, because there are only, I think, a couple of water schemes that are having I think it's only Whangamata and Whitianga, I think, off the top of my head, where the water meters are being. Yeah, it's not across the district, is my understanding, whereas the leak detection program is across the district.
Yeah, and even though they are separate, I recognise the point that understanding household usage is a really good driver for finding those leaks as well. So you start to, so there is definitely a linkage between those, understanding where your water's going.
And the third part of the water strategy, which is around education, you just can't put numbers on that one. So that's not included, although it is in the action plan to actually keep that work going forward.
Any further questions? Yes.
Although this is a job for comms, isn't it? Educating people is a job for comms, and that would attract a figure, a number in a box. And at some stage, I'm sure there was a discussion about having a person to go into schools and to communities and things like that, that would also attract a cost. So I think education could be quantified, but that might be another discussion about what that looks like and what budget is prepared to be allocated to it.
I'm glad you raised that, actually, because when I was reading about the interim target years, I did wonder why those 3 years were chosen as the interim targets. But when you say that it aligns with the LTP, that makes a lot of sense to me, because of course that's where we do set the budgets. So I guess the thing that I wanted to sort of flag is that in preparation of the LTP, we start quite a long way before we actually adopt it, and that this is front of mind, so that we know what parts of the reductions plan need to be implemented through budgets in the LTP, and that elected members are fully aware of that and fully on board with that before it's too late to include it in the LTP. It's really just a timing issue to flag.
Yeah, it's also so staff know, so they can put those proposals forward.
Right. Oh, sorry, Martin has a question.
Yes, so just the bit that's directly underneath the marginal abatement cost curve graph, page 13 of the strategy, 35 of the agenda. Just looking at those prioritization points, and I know this is getting into a level of detail, but there's already detail on that point, so I think it's just worth looking at. Saying install solar panels at 5 water treatment plants to power the building, but not the treatment equipment itself, which requires round-the-clock /year power. I'm just a little bit puzzled, because I know there are firms, and our A&G Price is an example of that, where they have solar panels and they have some great and batteries, and they have great intelligence around when they're drawing power from the batteries, when they are topping the batteries up at low peak power, that kind of thing. And it just sort of seems to me that this seems to be saying that the treatment equipment at the treatment plants can't be powered by solar power, and I'm not sure why that would be the case, but that's probably a level of detail that only geeks like me are interested in, maybe.
We have actually investigated this already. We do have a report, and I think it's just a case of the numbers don't stack up for most of those water treatment plants, but there are 5 where it does, and where we can actually create financial savings as well to actually recoup the cost of installing those solar power arrays. So that's the that's the reason why the number 5 is in there.
I'll speculate a little bit, but the demand on those treatment plants fluctuates a lot. So when you're having a spike and you're having to have bigger batteries, and that's probably why you can't justify it. You've got a low level solar power coming in most of the time, but to meet that spike, the big batteries are sometimes not economic based on what we're seeing now. Hopefully that changes in the future.
Councillor Connell?
Final question, page 41 of the packet, which is page 24 of the strategy. Just looking at estimated district greenhouse gas emissions, and a question related to our previous discussion about waste water. My understanding is that we truck enormous amounts of the byproduct, the solids from our SBRs, our sequencing batch reactors, for those who are not aware of what an SBR is, off to landfill. And I know there is some work being done with a particular fly to try and consume some of those solids, but I would suggest, I'm not sure if it's included in that green wedge of pie, I assume that it is, but I would suggest that is somewhere that other places around the country and around the world have managed their solids from their bio waste in a manner that has brought savings and also reduced emissions. So for me, that is always festering, excuse the word, at the back of my mind. You don't want to get in my mind. The back of my mind is that solid waste byproduct from the SBRs, and what are we doing about it?
In terms of the solid waste from our wastewater treatment plants, then that is something that I have spotted. We are looking at what the numbers look like. They would actually be recorded as council's emissions rather than the district's. But we do, of course, truck those out of the district. So they probably come under scope 3, but it is something that we can potentially look at because it's potentially part of our organizational carbon footprint. So just because we set targets around scopes 1 and 2 doesn't mean to say we shouldn't do what we can to reduce all those indirect emissions as well. So it is something that is on the radar at some level or another.
I would very much suggest that it needs to be top of the radar, because if we are going into negotiations potentially for a water services organisation, I raise that again, and an aspiration or what is important to us as a council could be something that is worked through with those partner councils around that solid waste and reducing that to landfill. So I think if there was ever a time to have that discussion, it is now, when we're actually looking at going into a CCO or a WSO and making that one of our negotiation, or a shared aspiration, if we are with a group of councils, that we put the intelligence or the right people into finding that solution.
Absolutely agree. And Emma's writing it down. Councillor Rodley?
Yes, agree completely with Councillor Connell there. And yeah, there is no better time to lock those things in, as it were, than now when we're looking at it. We don't want to be, hopefully sitting around here in a year's time and going, oh, we can't even consider the upgrades to our water treatment plants to reduce emissions because they're not in any sort of KPIs or MOUs or whatever around those entities. So I don't know if the working group on the local waters done well has sounded out our potential partners around that, but I mean, if they are councils and they're bound by just the same emission reduction targets as everyone else. So I can't imagine why they wouldn't have those as targets.
It would be unfair, but we in fact do have one of our subject matter experts in the room on that political discussion. And so I wondered, Terry, would you like to comment?
Political discussions, but I definitely certainly be discussed under the operational side with the discussions. You'll find that the wastewater plants are sort of all getting standardised across and even the government's looking at the standardisation in one wastewater plant. So there will be, I suppose, a part of that discussion will come out how that that part of it, the waste, the solids are dealt with. But yeah, it hasn't been in our discussions to date, but I think it's more of an operational discussion rather than a political one.
Thank you. I'm glad we were able to call on you for that.
With respect to my esteemed colleague, I would say that the right time is to actually express aspirations with potential partner councils at the time. And I see that Kishan has added that in India, solid waste is used to create biodiesel, which is then processed into compost.
We have been through this discussion quite a lot with the solids, and we used it for all sorts of putting on land, but we were stopped by Fonterra wouldn't let us put it on land because it's human waste. So so we've looked at lots of options. And even a bio mixer, which we had in Whitianga, which we're going to mix with greens, it didn't quite work. So there's been lots of discussion. So looking for an opportunity to find a resolution would be great.
This sort of makes me wonder. We're looking at, we talked in the previous item about the timeline of when that would come to council. Can I presume that these are coming to council at the same meeting, the 24th of June? Or are we receiving them at different meetings? Because I wonder if because this is such an important discussion, I think it would be useful to have the whole of the elected membership on board with this, whether this is something that we as a committee will take up when we discuss this as a council. But to answer my question, when will we? When is it coming?
Our plan was to bring the emissions reduction plan back to the 5th of August. So get the strategy adopted, hopefully, on the 24th of June by council. And as Amon said, we've basically got about 24 hours to turn the final document around. To do that with the emissions reduction plan in the same 24 hours might be asking a little bit too much, either of staff or the designer.
No, I think that's absolutely acceptable, and we don't want to put undue pressure. We want to do it right the first time. So absolutely agree with those timelines.
And of course, it would be making sure that targets in the emissions reduction plan meet with the adopted targets of the strategy.
Yeah.
If they go on the same day, then
I hear you.
There's a risk, however small, that it might not quite align.
I have Mo with his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and through the chair of the group. When the matter gets considered at the council meeting on the 24th, the local water done well, it would pay for council to pass a resolution to include in the statement of intent the requirement for climate change aspects to be considered as part of the future water services delivery. That's all it needs. And leave the rest for officers to work out.
That is excellent advice, and one that we will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. I do have one other, I really love inclusive language, and so this has used our council throughout. That was a little soapbox that I jumped on a few years ago to try to talk about our council rather than the council to make people feel inclusive. I think just one step further to that in this document, you have in a couple of different places referred to councillors making decisions, and I feel that should change from, like, for example, on page 36 of the agenda, 15 of the reductions plan, under roles and responsibilities, councillors make high-level decisions such as adopting. I think that should be elected members so that we can be absolutely inclusive of both the mayor, who's not a councillor, and the community board members who are also valuable elected members but not councillors in their job title. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for pointing that one out. I hadn't spotted that, or either. That's all right. It actually provides a very nice segue to the next slide. Is we are aware. Well, there are some typographical errors that we know of, but we're also aware, and you're probably aware as well, is that we have some figures that have not copied across particularly well into the design version. That's because some of them came from spreadsheets and were just copied across, and they're not reading the spreadsheets very well. So just to let you know that these are the 6 that we're proposing to just slot in instead. They're basically saying exactly the same thing. Some of them are exactly the same, but just to let you know that that's why they might be looking slightly odd at the moment. They won't be when we get it finished. Other than that, that's
Excellent. Thank you. Do you have more slides? Do you have anything else to say? Oh, blank slide. Okay. Well, before we move on, we've got 2 further recommendations. I would just ask if anybody else has anything else to say. Got shakes of the head in here.
I was just going to refer to the recommendation that we're not asking for a blanket approval to do everything regardless of the costs. Everything's got to be contingent on the costs of the actions being understood and coming back for approvals in the appropriate forum, which is what we mean in those recommendations.
Yeah, so in recommendation 3, that does say and costs being available. Let's just check in with councillors online. Have you got anything that you would like to add or any questions that you have before we start on the resolutions?
No, that's fine. The last.
Thanks, Robin.
Yep, that's great.
Okay. And in the room, we've got no more questions. Okay, cool bananas. In that case, we'll move to the resolutions. So resolution 2 endorses the proposed greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan, contingent on the understanding the costs of implementing individual future projects and those costs being available to undertake the actions required. And 3 recommends to council that it adopts the greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan, contingent on understanding the costs of implementing individual future projects and those costs being available to undertake the actions required, and the inclusion of Te Reo Māori section headings. Cool bananas. Do I have a mover and a seconder for these? I have Councillor Rodley.
Happy to second.
I will have Councillor Morrissey. No further discussions, changing wordings, anything like that? No? Okay, well then I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Lovely. That is carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just wonder, given that it's only 12 and our caterers will be here at 12:30, that we have availability of Anna or someone? Oh, it's already in the building.
Oh, the food is in the building, in which case I'll close the meeting. No, I did just want to say thank you for you guys. There's a lot of heavy lifting in this, and it was really good to read, and it was really lovely to see action, things that we've been wanting to see for a long time. And before I do declare the meeting closed, I'd also just like to thank Brian Taylor, who stepped in to help GM this committee. And it's such a pleasure to have Jeanette Wakata take on that role, although Brian, I miss you already, even though you're still in the room. And I'm really hoping that this committee has a future within council in the next triennium as well, so that we can continue the good work. So thank you everybody who's inputted. Thank you to the members who've come along and acknowledge that we've had a number of special guest councillors arrive at meetings and put their input. So today, Terry Kashan, you're online from the Thames Community Board, and I do appreciate your input. Thank you very much. And with that, I can only also thank my amazing governance team who keep me up to date and have exactly what I need to say written down, which is very helpful because I'm quite a nervous chair. So thank you very much. And with that, I declare the meeting of the Sustainability and Community Resilience Committee closed at 12:05. Thank you.
Awesome.